Dr. Scott, Dr. Sayer, Dr. Chris Martin, how you guys doing?
Good.
How's everybody? April, how's it going?
Oh.
Yeah, going good?
Good, thanks for
Okay.
asking.
Yep, all right. So today's topic, we're gonna be talking about hygiene overhead. So staff costs have gone up, and it, excuse me. And as a percentage, it's drifted high. Can anybody tell me what their percentage of staff costs in hygiene has drifted to? Where are we at?
My staff costs for hygiene have basically doubled. Now, we've always paid well. We've always paid on commission once the hygienist is acclimated to the office and has some nice patient flow. So we've always paid high. But in acquiring a new one, there are a lot of hygienists in Ohio area, mid US, $75 an hour.
That's what we need.
Yeah. Where are you guys at, Scott? Where are you guys paying?
Yeah, we're $75 an hour. We're in Ohio. Yeah.
Dr. Chris, yeah, you're at that same rate?
75. That's the number.
But the interesting thing is, again, since I pay on commission and my hygienists are seeing, 10, 12 patients, they're actually making more than that. We have a couple hygienists that make about $100 an hour.
Tell us about your commission breakdown, how that works.
We do a straightforward 30%, I believe, and they really do well with scaling and root planing, and of course we do well on those too. But yeah, we just do a straight percentage. We do give them, I think, some little amounts of funds. Cheryl would have to tell you on this. If they do arrest in, if they do this or that, or put sealants on, they get some of that, but it's not like they're straight hygiene. But my top hygienist made $164,000 last year.
You get a piece of your doctor exams. Is that counted?
They do not get doctor exams. Nope.
Okay. So I see that kind of going back and forth. Some people count it, some people don't. So you guys don't.
Right. We do not.
And your commission's either or, right? So $75 or commission.
Yeah. So if they're starting and we can get them for lower, that's great. If it's a brand new hygienist or something, but if it's $75 an hour, and then they see their other hygienists are actually doing better because they're now seeing more than 6 to 8 patients, whatever the number is, and they can do better, then they want to go on commission, which we're happy because I'd rather have a hygiene assistant and do, see more patients and give them a little bit more. That's great.
So when they first come in, they're not on commission.
Right. They're not fast enough. They don't have the skills. They don't even understand how that works. As a matter of fact, when you hire people and you tell them that we hire on commission and that we're happy to do that, half of them don't even want to come in for the interview. They just don't get it. Yeah. They're just, I want to work by the hour. I don't want to work hard. Pay me.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing. It's pretty common that they don't like commission. So how long does it take you to kind of get them to warm up to it? To even consider?
Here's an interesting thing is like the last 4 hygienists that we have worked in my office as assistants or hygiene assistants, excuse me, before they went to hygiene school. So we just plug them in for 6 months and they're ready to go, and they understand it and they're already used to it, and they get the whole thing. So we've been very lucky with that since we have such a big staff and people do want to better themselves and go to school. So that's been great. But if we are hiring new hygienists, it's 6 months to a year before they really get it.
And tell me about, like, before COVID, what was the pay rate, before all this inflation and hygiene kind of squeeze?
You could get a hygienist for 45. If they're really seasoned, maybe $50 an hour. So it's gone up by, 40% or something. it just has changed dramatically. Number one, they were available. Now they're not.
Now they're not. Yeah. Is it still hard to recruit? I mean, like if you needed to fill a spot, is it like something that you could spend months trying to fill, or is it something that you can do within a month?
Months. What about you, Chris?
Same. We have to do the 75 an hour and troll that in the water behind the boat just to get people to bite. And then we find though is we can't make it work unless they run 3 columns with assistants in three columns.
Yeah.
Can you describe your system, Dr. Martin?
Yeah, so we have a thing we're trying to pioneer. We're kind of call it Happy Dental Day, where we have a new patient column per doctor with 4 new patients in there for 90 minutes each. Each of those patients gets a cleaning on the first visit to give people what they want when they get in the door. And our hygienist will clean those people's teeth. And it's typically just a basic cleaning. Even if they have perio, we 2-step perio like Dr. Peterson talks about for those people. But then they have 2 columns of 8 to 9 patients, hopefully chock full. And when we get it right and they're full, our average hygienist is kind of getting into that $2,700 a day, $2,400 a day number. That's a KPI that supports that 75 an hour. And we're also trying to do what Dr. Sayer's talking about, which is a commission above that if they go higher. And we had a gal, our top producer yesterday at Briar Creek, our 9-chair office. She did $4,700 yesterday or 2 days ago. It's crazy.
Yeah. So if they do commission on that, let's see, as far as 1,500, that's maybe $1,500 for their take-home income on that day.
Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, so getting them to bite on commission is really difficult. So as you guys know, they don't, when you try to hire somebody to talk commission, they almost want to spit in your face.
Yeah.
So it's almost impossible to even talk that coming in the door. And it is hard to even get them to switch and let go of their dollar amount. Like just getting them to think commission and let go of the dollar amount that was hard to do 10
Before
years ago.
COVID, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, so getting them to accept this now, and this is the question I have for Dr. Sick is
let me just say this: you don't know what you don't know. So it's the fear of the unknown that leads them down this path, and until they do it for a little while, there's not one hygienist. I've not lost. I don't lose hygienists. They make more money than some of the young doctors. So once they're committed, once they understand, once the practices are going, they are making tons of money. And again, we specifically don't let our hygienists do new patient exams. Chris is creating a really good point that, his new patient is 90 minutes, get the hygienist in there. But we specifically niche market to special, IV sedation, fearful patients. So they all are seen by the assistant. That opens up all of our hygiene for hygiene. They all make tons of money that way. I think we see close to 1,000 patients a month just in my Fairfax office on hygiene.
Do your new patients clean in the first visit, or is that something that you guys don't do?
So, great question. Let's say you have a 20-year-old that just moved in here and they're going to college and they've had great dentistry and everything's done. We do the new patient exam, and as soon as we can, we get a hygienist in there. And because we have accelerated hygiene, usually we can manage that. Because it's only going to take the exam's done, the X-rays are done, the health history is done, all the things that the hygienists don't need to do. So they're really going to be in there on a 20-year-old patient that's got a great mouth. What, 20 minutes?
Who makes the call, Dr. Sayer, on that? Like early in the appointment, who's the one that determines whether we're going to need to get a hygienist in that new patient?
So if the new patient is, number one, requesting it, and we know up front, it can kind of almost be predetermined, and the doctor certainly comes in and just stamps that, said, yep, get the hygienist. This is a great mouth, and we go over everything. We got all the X-rays. So again, it's just 15 or 20 minutes, and you can almost always slide 4 to 5 hygienists in the building. You can almost always slide somebody in there.
Like if you were to guess, I know you guys do sedation marketing, so you're getting a lot of patients with extensive needs. So this is a little different, right? But what percent of patients kind of fall in this category that you see that have relatively good health orally?
Yeah, another good question. It's not for my practice. It's
Right.
not many. It's
Not common. Yeah.
10%, 20%. That's why we don't put it over there in the hygiene. It's
Right.
just not very much. Now, I would say that my associates see, and they're all sedation certified, they all do it, but they probably see a little higher percentage. So maybe I'm 10% and they're 20%.
Okay. Okay.
Chris, what percentage of your patients do you find, because you do the sedation in your practices also, that don't want to have treatment that day?
Like hygiene or
Yeah,
just
have
any-
yeah,
treatment?
yeah. Even hygiene, or let's say they need scaling and root planing, and you've got them scheduled with don't you just call it at that point? Say, nope, hygienist not coming in. You know, you're afraid.
well, 100% depends on that patient. So just like you said, if you go in there and we basically tell our new patient specialist, if it looks like perio, you got to tell them this looks like perio. Let's get a doctor in there, and the doctor has to decide: are we doing this today? Is this a high fear patient, or is it not? And if they're one of those people that's pushing back and just wants a cleaning, we still tell them you've got perio. It's kind of a waste of money, but we're happy to go ahead and give you what you want and do a gross debridement today. And we have to make that call kind of real time,
Yeah.
in the moment. But everybody knows that 8 shots in your mouth and 4 quads of scaling is kind of miserable without without sedation. So we try to just offer them the option to come back, get their dentistry done, and do their cleaning at the same time. So
Yeah.
you have to call audible.
Do you guys mind if I jump here off subject real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I wanted to put my glasses on so I'd look like Chris. These are unbelievable. These are called Meta.
Oh,
The
wow.
Meta glasses.
Oh,
I
these
just
are
say-
the ones
I-
that you can.
Well, listen, I go, hey Meta, take a picture.
Oh,
You're
wow.
looking at the patient's mouth, Chris. Hey Meta, take a video. Stop! Don't. It'll take a 3-minute video of your implant case, your surgery case.
Wow.
Yeah, and you can take that then into any kind of a
Education.
situation. Yeah, but also you can talk to it. It's connected to your Siri. You can say, what's the biggest building here? How many people were in this? Tell me the. You probably go out and say, hey, this is an emergency. What's the dosage of epinephrine for ACLS? I mean, really.
It's a game changer.
How long have you been using?
Just really started. They've only been out for about a year, I think. These are prescriptions, so they were costly.
Okay.
If you don't need a prescription, $250.
Wow.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah. Wow.
This technology for 200, and you hear there's a speaker built in. I could do all of this and just be listening to you guys with this. I don't need to have my computer on. Anyway, Chris, I thought I'd throw it out there. Check it out.
Yeah.
It's really, I think it's going to be a game changer. When they put the heads up display in this, which I'll bet will be within 5 years, you'll be walking around with your computer in your pocket, and this thing's going to allow you to see whatever you want, read things, read books, look around. I think the main reason, and I hope you're not, oh, you did say you're recording this, so I'm not going to say this. Well, maybe I will. I think the main reason they're being sold right now is, for the most part, they're sunglasses, and the guys on the beaches taking pictures and videos of all the people walking around. So it's kind of funny, but they've been great in the office. So I thought I'd just share that with you.
That's cool.
So as a percentage of overhead, you're paying probably one of the top rates, trying to find hygienists, $75. What has hygiene, the optimal, you guys, for hygiene, the cost of the employees in hygiene versus how much they produce should be around a third. Now, not very many people are able to do that anymore, but where you think you're at, Dr. Sayer?
Oh, we specifically stay there because our hygienists, we pay a third, but they're also doing Arrestin and Curidont and sealants and all these other things. And so the main thing too is we do like we do a full office. We do $75,000 a month in same day treatment. And I would say the majority of that comes from hygiene. So the hygienists are there as a total loss leader. People don't understand that. Dentists who don't get into their business aspects don't understand what that's for. It's like saying, I'm a physician, I'm not gonna have a nurse in my office. I'm not gonna have anybody help me take blood pressure, start the thing, it's really
Right.
the same thing. Those people don't produce anything, they just save you time.
Yeah. Well, obviously, as staff costs have driven up, as I said in the beginning, uh, kind of a lot of people feeling the pinch of overhead and hygiene. And so what I want to talk about today is, well, how do we correct that? Okay, so there's three problems that you might be having. And so you're gonna have either a combination of these three. Usually it's centered, your main problem is gonna be one of these three. So number one, and this is easy, hygiene's not full to begin with. You've got a hygienist, you're paying them $50, $60 an hour. But when you look out next week and the following week, it's not even full to begin with, right? So that's going to create an overhead problem, right? So that's problem one. I'm going to talk about that here in a second. Problem two is it falls apart day of or the day before, meaning it was full, but as soon as that day comes, it just completely disintegrates, sorry, and falls apart, okay? And then number three is the hygienist is not holding up their part of the bargain where they're making sure all the x-rays are up to date, that they're doing the sealants, that they're doing the fluoride rinses, they're doing their whitening, and then of course scalings, right? So that's the last part. So it's going to be one of these three things is going to be your main problem, but it could be a little bit of all of them, right? So the third one can be a little touchy. So this is where getting hygienists on commission, they can really shine for you and really make a big difference in the overhead of hygiene. The trick is how do you get them on commission and get them motivated? So we'll talk about that. But let's go back to the first one. Hygiene is not full to begin with, okay? And it's usually centered around, say, 3 to 4 main problems. Number one is case acceptance. The doctor themselves is overwhelming patients. Overwhelmed patients don't stay in the practice, right? So if the doctor gets a little aggressive, you're going to see that hygiene is going to be hard to keep full. People will feel guilt in coming back, and because they didn't follow through with your recommendations. So you're looking to achieve, I would say as a minimum, 60 to 70% case acceptance on new patients that you see. So take all your new patients that had restorative treatment, 70% roughly, and it can be plus or minus 10%, should have accepted something.
Can I jump in there?
Go ahead.
Our goal is 85%.
Yeah.
Okay, I think at 60 and 70, and we track this every single week, and all the doctors are tracked, and we go between 80 and 90%, sometimes 100% on all the doctors all the time. And it's because what Greg taught us: tell them what they need and give them what they want.
Right. So it goes back to overwhelming patients.
Yeah,
absolutely. So 60% is kind of a cutoff. It's like anything below that, it means you're really out of line. It means you're seriously out of line. At 60%, tweaking how the pre-assessment goes, tweaking the treatment coordinators can get you into the zone. Remember, at 70% is kind of the number where the practice starts to build. And 80% it really hygiene starts to build, is what I'm saying. So really at 60%, it's kind of a maintenance number that's if you want hygiene to start busting at the seams, it really needs to be more like 80%. And there's kind of a rule of thumb that I'm going to throw out, and there's all these rules of thumb can be broken. So don't, okay? But the rule of thumb is the replacement level of just people moving and that kind of thing, each column of hygiene needs to have at least 15 new patients a month, somewhere in that zone. So if you're not getting 15 new patients a month for every column of hygiene, it's going to be hard to just keep up with just people moving, let alone people that don't like you or that you offend one day, right? So you got to have some new point. And again, that's a rule of thumb that can be broken. Okay, so keep that in mind. That if you're not having enough new patients, that you're depleting your well, just the natural loss of patients. You won't be keeping up, so you're going to develop holes in your practice. So 15 per column, and again, that's like the kind of a maintenance level. That's not a growth level. Okay. The next thing would be fees. And I say fees, I mean, this could be insurance, in and out of network, super high fees. All these things matter. And if you go the route of higher fees and out of network, retention could be a little tougher. But you can offset that with a little bit more of that new patient flow. So when people go out of network, they have to do a little bit more marketing because they're going to lose more people than somebody that has that are in network. So if you're out of network, you're probably going to have to do 20 new patients a column to keep up. Okay. So and then of course the other thing is patients scheduling their next month or the next 6 months needs to be 95% leaving with an appointment.
Yep.
So we know that if they without an appointment, there's only a 50% chance of them showing up in their 6-month recall. So like we see a lot of practices that do okay and they're at 80%. So they're at least 10% off. Well, we know they're losing 5% of their practice every month. And that's 90%. You really want to shoot for 95. Okay. So you want to take this very serious. And the other thing is the hygienist should be making these appointments. We know that if the hygienist makes the appointment, the patient's much more likely to show up. So, and there's scripting for this, pretty simple scripting, but you've got to train your hygienist not to say, does this time work good for you? That is not what they should be saying. They should be using the dual alternative close. What works best for you, mornings or afternoons? I've got a Tuesday or Wednesday. Okay. So,
Hey, Wes,
yeah,
is it just Chris and me and you on here?
no.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was just wondering because what you're going through is, freaking Whitehall 101.
101. This is Whitehall 101.
This is brilliant. This is amazing. And this is what all practices need. And I've been doing this for a long, long time. I guess that's why you got me and Chris sitting here. But my office needs this reinforcement. I didn't realize that you were going to specifically do this. I would have 70 people on here listening to this. So I want more information as you guys do. I've seen this several times. Sometimes I'm not available on Saturdays, but you're so right on. It's not even funny. I hate to interrupt. Keep going.
Okay, so those are like the four major things that you've got to make sure. You got to have enough new patient flow. If you're out of network or you're doing higher fees, you're going to need a slightly more new patients than somebody that is going to be using insurance. Now, there's pros and cons to that, but keep that in mind, okay? And then case acceptance is the number one thing. If your practice is not building and busting at the seams, it's either you're not getting enough new patients with a good batting average. I have offices where it is like Dr. Sayer, it's 90% every week. It's 90, 95, 85. And hygiene is just busting at the seams and it's booked out 6 months, 8 months. That's a practice that's going places, right? And making decisions to expand is easy when you're busting at the seams. And that's where you want to get to. And it's centered around those areas. Okay. So number 2 is when it falls apart. Okay. So number 1 is not full to begin with. Okay. Number 2, it falls apart the day before, the day of. Now this can be a problem of kind of to tell them what they need, give them what they want. You know, if we are hard closing and we are ramming bite guards and night guards and all these different services down their throat every 6 months, you can kind of cause patient overwhelm and patients not to want to show up. In other words, by being too aggressive at their 6-month recall and really pushy, this is kind of where I'm hesitant at on the third thing I talked about, where you get the hygienist to really start, I'm going to say the word, I'm going to say a naughty word, selling, is they can create an environment where patients really don't want to come back. And that's a dangerous thing. Okay. So first thing to evaluate is, are we doing that? You know, so you look at my case acceptance. Okay, I'm at 70%. And this is not dollar amount. This is batting average. I saw 10 new patients, 7 said yes to something. Okay. So I'm doing well. So I'm not overwhelming people. Then you got to look at your hygiene team and go, are they overwhelming people? And they can be, right? And so that can cause people not to want to really come back. So you got to evaluate those 2 things first. Okay. Then what you got to do is look at hygiene coordination. So if hygiene is falling apart, usually it can be fixed with good hygiene coordination. And what's happened lately, not lately, over the last 4 or 5 years, our front desks have gotten lazy on confirmations. They rely completely on the automated text messages, and it's causing all kinds of problems. Okay, so if you track the people that miss the appointments, the problem people, the people that no showing and canceling last minute, the vast majority of them did not respond to the original text message to confirm the appointment. That's what you're going to find. Now, there's some practices where that's not true, but for most of you listening, that's going to be your problem, is that group of people that don't respond immediately to that text. The other point is that text cannot go out 2 weeks before. That's too far out from the actual appointment to confirm. So you can send a text out stating they have appointment coming up, but you don't want them to be able to confirm that appointment. You want the confirmation text going out approximately a week before the appointment. So it's a little closer. And then what you have to do is the next day, your team has to be calling all the people that didn't respond to that text. Do not rely on that system to send more text to that person and try to get them to confirm through that text. Because if you're anything like me and you see a text and you didn't respond to it, you're a little bit flaky. Let's just use that word. Okay. And so your team needs to get a verbal confirmation from these people. It's very important they talk to them on the phone the next day. And that should be, 6 days before the appointment.
Hey, Wes, can I jump in on that one real quick?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So we just recently did a calculation in our practice based on KPIs that were pre-COVID. And I'd gone around the office and I surveyed every hygienist in our company. And at the time, I think we had maybe 15 hygienists total before COVID. And I just asked them, I said, when you're in a state of flow and you had a good day, what did you produce? And they all said, let me get back to you. And they all said, about $1,200 a day. I'm like, okay, in one room, right? And they get one room, yeah. How many people on average would buy a crown out of your room a day, or like in a week, on average, how many people would schedule dentistry and what
Sure.
dollar amount? And they said, about 1,200, 1,300. And that's not, selling or being too hard. I'm like, okay, well, how many people on average would buy dentistry same day that got dentistry done that day by dollar amount? And they said, probably about $350. And I literally surveyed every individual hygienist, and they all said the exact same numbers, basically. within 5 or 10% of each other. We established those as KPIs for those people and held them to those numbers. And guess what? We went from 4,000 a day in an office to 6,000 a day, literally in 30 days, just in hygiene production. And then when that thing started getting full and these guys were all paying attention to that, those numbers proved themselves out. So in other words, that was $3,000 a day that hygiene column is worth. If it's full, you're going to have $1,300 in production in today's fees, $1,300 in scheduled treatment that shows up basically the same, from last week's showing up today as production. And then there's going to be $300 to $400 in same day that happens if you're into same day, which of course Whitehall offices are. So the true value of a hygiene column is $3,000 of revenue every single day. That's just an average room if it's full and you're doing Whitehall stuff.
So
Yep.
Chris and Wes, do you guys, I thought that I learned this from Whitehall, possibly not. Do you have your hygienists do what we call a prospectus?
No.
Oh my, plug this one in, because I totally agree with what you're saying, Chris. And it's easier than even making it a KPI. The hygienists in my office are responsible for going in and prior to seeing their patients for that day, going through the chart, because really you think about it, the hygienist for the most part, if you have new patients doing this, it's one thing, but they're seeing people who've been in your office before.
Right.
They didn't do this crown and they didn't do this filling, and they didn't do this surgery and they didn't do this.
Sure.
So in the prospectus, the hygienist goes through all the patients they're going to see and in advance says, these ones need x-rays, these ones need a new pan, these ones need this one needs a crown. The doctor has said they've got an abscess here. Whatever the patient hasn't done goes on this prospectus and it's presented to the patient again, and the doctor in advance, hey, Mrs. Jones is here, Dr. Sayer, come on in, let's take a look. By the way, she still needs a root canal done on number 3. It hasn't been hurting, but there's a big abscess here and she's going to lose this tooth. That's said as the doctor's coming in the room.
Yep. So Dr. Sayer, it's a lot like same day service. Wes and I talk about this a lot. Like you just assume that we talked about it. And then next thing you know, you turn around and the whole religion has changed. Like people just stop talking about same day. So I think these things you're talking about, even though we do them, quote unquote, I think you have to always circle back to the wagon, circle the wagons and keep talking about this stuff forever. Otherwise it'll go the way of the dinosaur. And we do that. But I think you have to stay on people to do it. Yep.
But all I'm saying is this is a built-in. So if they don't do the prospectus that day, they're not our hygienist.
Exactly. Right.
So
You got to hold them
point is,
accountable.
I'm happy Cheryl can send you guys this little form that we have. Wes, you might like it, and Chris for sure. And then you just institute this, and you walk into the office, and you in the morning, whatever hygienist you're looking at or your other doctors, where's the prospectus? You didn't do it the first year. You got to push. This is a new. You're exactly right. It just gets away from everybody. But when you make it a standard and you have a form that they have to fill out every day, it becomes pretty easy.
Yeah. Can we get a copy of that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Send that over and we'll send it to the group. So for those of you,
I'm an old fart. Send me a reminder. Have
Lori-
Lori's on
Lori's
here.
listening,
Lori, send me
so-
a reminder.
Yep.
No,
And then
actually, Lori send Cheryl a reminder.
yeah. So it's called a hygiene prospectus.
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Wes, can I throw out a couple things? We have a hygiene coordinator, and of course, their job is all hygiene. So a couple things, we do this breadcrumbs and thank you. So she has a weekly goal, and it has to do with the fewer openings, the more money she gets on her paycheck every 2 weeks. So we have a kind of a sliding thing. I have 3 full-time hygienists. So if there's 10 openings or less, she gets this much. If there's 6 or less, if there's 2 or less, it goes up to $100. So she's motivated by that breadcrumb and thank you. The other thing that her job is to, in the morning on EagleSoft, if a patient has treatment that's not completed, it will be a pink box. So she has to go through all the pink boxes and print out what hasn't been done yet. So we don't have to go on the computer. It'll be laying there. And that way I can have the x-rays up and looking at that at the same time. And that really helps because that's part of, like Dr. Sayer was saying, when they come in, they'll say, Mary, we see her every 4 months. There is uncompleted treatment, and here it is. And then it's a reminder. It's like, oh, we haven't done that yet. Oh, I'm surprised, again. And if we've got openings, I bonus that too for same day.
Of course, yeah. So yeah, I was gonna get into bonuses for.
I just want to jump in there. Just
Uh-huh.
the closer that you take the bonus, the closer that you take the actual, not treatment, but awareness of what needs to be done,
Yep.
the more it will be perfected. So if you're on a conveyor belt and you're on the line and you have to put a bolt in here, and the guy down the road has to take the bolt out to put his bolt in, that's the quality control that needs to be done. So I love what you just said, Doc. Just if you have one person for 3 hygienists, they got a big thing, and they got to look at x-rays and this and that. So take it to the hygienists. When Wes gets this prospectus, start to look at this and perfect it, because it is the hygienist's job to know, I need to take an x-ray, I need to take a pan, I need to think about sealants. This is a 6-year-old kid, they got new molars, I need to do this and this and this, rather than they're not lazy. Okay, none of us are lazy. We just don't know what we don't know.
Scott,
Yeah.
can I ask you a question?
Or something, I don't know what, there's something, they're a little different breed of cat. So lazy, no, but yeah, the fight you on just about anything, and even a good idea. Go ahead, Dr. Peterson.
Now, Scott, when do you have the hygienist do that? The day before, over their lunch hour, early in the morning? Because I work with a number of California offices, and that's a whole different world. They have different laws for what is overtime,
Mm-hmm.
mandatory 15-minute breaks twice a day.
No,
mandatory
that all
uninterrupted.
goes out the door when they basically become commission. Okay, so if they want to make $165,000 a year, they can do it whenever they want. I don't care if they do it at home at midnight.
They just got a pre-plan to be able to make that kind of money, right?
I think that my hygienists basically come in a little bit earlier. It only you got 12 patients. How long does it take you to look at the x-rays in their treatment plan? What, a minute per person? So that's 12 minutes. Are you kidding me? Not a hard thing to accomplish. Again, like Wes said, they reject a good idea.
Yeah.
But if it
Absolutely.
makes them more money, and you really can tell that the practice is going up because of this, it's kind of a no-brainer. So some of them I know do it the night before, because let's say they finish, we try and really finish our schedules on time, so they got another 10 minutes, and that's all it takes. And some of them come in early because they're just that kind of people. I'm an early morning person. I would come in, and that's what I do in the morning. So that kind of thing.
Can
Okay.
I jump in real quick on that too? I was just at the DEO meeting, Dr. Sayer and group, that there's AI getting into all of our PMSs now and crawling through all of our data. And what they're finding across all DSOs is that there's like a scale of like high or low risk, high return things that we can do in our practice in hygiene to just close the gap in profitability. And can you guys guess what the lowest risk, Dr. Peterson, this would be for you, the lowest risk, highest return, lowest overhead thing that can be done in hygiene that we're missing industry-wide in hygiene, that's required by law, that is standard of care, that helps, it's a diagnostic piece. What do you think is being missed by hygiene teams around the country that, again, is low risk, high reward, and is standard of care that we miss?
I would say 6-point probing, so they know what they're dealing with.
Well, that is very high as well. Missed perio, huge. The number one thing that they find was missed full mouth series and pano updates.
It's x-rays. It's x-rays. They refuse.
X-rays.
They refuse to do it.
Yep.
And they know. And if you don't have an x-ray that shows a need for a filling or a restoration or a crown or whatever, you miss out on the whole boat.
Restorative side
And
too.
some of the new AI programs that emphasize perio, as you were saying, Chris, actually will have color changes and will outline changes in bony density, bone height, even calculate attachment levels.
Yeah,
So,
Pearl AI does all of that for us.
yeah,
And
there's
it's just dumbed it down. It's such a no-brainer now. Like it finds all the perio based on the bite wings.
and it's for
so-
sales, for selling a case, if you will, it's a lot better than drawing on a piece of paper.
100%.
Yeah, so the better the information, yeah, it's very much akin to where taking intraoral photography was 20 years ago or 30 years ago when it just didn't catch on. But once people realized the value for convincing patients, it totally changed. Now it's standard for almost everybody.
He muted himself. He looks a lot younger there.
The other piece that's so important to keep in mind is this is basically all covered by insurance. So it's not out of pocket for patients. Like it's
Right.
the easiest thing possible to get.
If you get rejections on your perio, you need to get Pearl. One perio rejection per month would more than triple pay for Pearl in your office.
Oh yeah.
Everybody who's listening on this call, AI, there's Overjet, there's Pearl, there's a couple others. We use Pearl. It sounds like Chris uses Pearl in all of our offices. And it shows you attachment loss. It shows you this. It shows you incipient caries, which you can now
Abscesses.
Yeah, all of it. I mean, it's really, the other thing is it allows you to create a system that gets all the doctors into the same diagnosis.
Yeah, for sure.
You can show things and you can say, docs, you're going to use this. Don't turn it off. It's also a great patient aid.
Yep.
Teaching them what's going on. So,
Yep.
That will standardize your diagnosis, or it should.
Sure.
And then it ought to help you with calibration on treatment planning.
Yes.
Yeah, if you got multiple doctors, yeah. Okay, so there are other things you can do, obviously, with the hygiene coordination. You can ratchet up, but for most of you, just getting your team to call the day before, the day after those texts were not confirmed will help. Now, if it continues to be a problem, we will tell the patient, hey, if we don't hear from you by the end of business day, we're gonna have to release this appointment and give, so it's important that you call us back and confirm this appointment. We'll take it that far, and we'll typically do that 3 days before the appointment. If we're running into a real problem, meaning the patient base have kind of been trained in a way that they feel that they can kind of abuse the office. And if you have that kind of office, you know who you are. And so instead of threatening the $50, if we've got a full office, meaning we don't have problem one, our problem is it falls apart second day. What you want to do is get these people that are not committed to calling you back and viewing this appointment as something important. You want to get them off the books and get somebody that needs to get in on the books.
No. Benji.
So that's how far we'll take it. And you may have to take it that far. If you want a perfect schedule, a lot of times what we're doing is double booking. Essentially, we're taking people off and putting them into a fake column and putting somebody else in there. And occasionally that other person will show up and we'll apologize. We might even have gift cards for them. We'll try to work them in, but we can't let one person every other week that stumbles in ruin basically our practice because of that person's feelings. So we'll take it that far if we have to, but first start with just calling these people right after that text goes out, the people that did not confirm. Okay, call them for a couple days. If you don't hear from them at that point, I would get them off the books. Okay, now the goal is 5% openings or less. That's the goal. That means you're doing really pretty good. Okay, you start to get to 10% or higher, you've got a massive problem at 10% higher. But 5% and less, that's the target. Okay. Now we're going to kind of get into let's talk bonuses for hygiene assistants. So I think Dr. Hall bonus is very similar to what if you're gonna do a hygiene bonus, it's based on how many openings are normal. So you would look back over the last few weeks, see how many openings you guys typically have, how many appointments, and kind of create a bonus where they can, by filling, and usually it's weekly. So we go weekly on the hygiene bonus, based on how many openings. If they can reduce it down, and we do the same idea, certain levels they earn so much. And he's got the number right. They've got to be able to earn upwards of $200 a month if the schedule's really good.
Yeah,
If
my
they
game
can't
is,
earn that kind of money, you're not gonna see a lot of motivation.
yeah, the game we do is weekly, and then, but we pay every 2 weeks. So it
Right.
gets added on to their check, and it's all written out of what they did and how they did it. And yeah, because we want that gratification and know that, yeah, it helps the practice, it helps the patients. So
The other thing I want to talk, oh, sorry. I think, sorry, was how do we deal with cancellations when people call? Okay, so I've seen a lot of different things been done, and said, and of course, kind of the popular one is hey, it's $50. Are you sure you can't make it down here? Right? And that requires you to obviously have a cancellation fee, which some people do, some people don't. And that works pretty well, especially the day of. People trying to cancel day of. If people are canceling 2 or 3 days before, one thing that's pretty effective is letting them know it's really difficult to actually get a good hygiene spot. I won't be able to get you in for the next 4 weeks, even though you have an appointment 3 days from now. And you actually book them out 4 weeks, but you keep track of these people, and you let them know as you book them out, you keep track of them, and you let them know that, hey, openings come up all the time. I'll get you on a will call list, and I'll call you when we have openings. So you can start to build a will call list from these people that you're putting out 2 or 3 weeks, as people try to call and cancel, 2 days before the appointment. That's another trick that's been pretty effective. It's a little sinister. I get that, but a lot of our offices are booked out. So it's not a lie, so you definitely want to utilize that. If you are booked out, let them know, hey, are you sure you can't make it? Because I can't get you in for, it's going to be weeks and weeks and weeks, maybe a month and a half. Okay. And so that's been pretty effective with cancellations. Okay. Now that requires obviously a team that's motivated and willing to use scripting and all that kind of stuff, which is a separate whole separate topic, motivation of the entire team. With cancellations, remember, they're going to be calling anybody at the front desk that picks up. So you got to really make sure that they really know how to deal with cancellations. So whatever way you go, they got to really know how to be confident on how they deal with cancellations. Okay. Number 3, the third thing we talked about was the hygienist is not motivated to fill their schedule, not motivated to find any scalings, not going to do the x-rays, not going to do any whitening, no fluoride, nothing, and like I said in the beginning, it's kind of one of these things you got to be a little careful you don't unleash a problem into your practice. So it's very similar to having a super aggressive doctor. You bring somebody that's ultra aggressive and really starts talking about a lot of treatment with patients and starting to hard close them. Well, hygienists can do the same thing. And they can drive people out of this practice just as efficiently as a doctor. So you have to be real careful that you've got the right person before you try to get them on commission. Okay, you've got to make sure that they're not too aggressive. Let's put it that way. Okay, so you got to be careful. So commission, you guys heard it. So 30%, 33% is typically the way most people do it. They usually be a period like of kind of an either or, meaning you get paid $60 an hour or you get 30% commission, whichever's greater. Some people will take that dollar amount away, and just go straight commission like Dr. Sayer does. So either way you do it, is fine, just as long as they're motivated to drive for that commission. There's another way you can do it. Okay. And this is one that Whitehall's been teaching for years. And this is you figure out their daily production. Let's say it's $1,000 a day. And you say every dollar above that, I'll give you 15%. And that way you don't have to get them on commission and convince them all that kind of stuff. You can just say, you just do a little more. I'll give you 15% of any, and you can go up to 20% there. But with most of you, I would assume that most of you have a hygiene overhead issue. I would start at 15%. And the key is getting their motivation.
Hey, Wes, is that each day on its own, or do you?
No. That's over the month. So it's calculated at the end of the month.
Okay,
So
thanks.
yeah, you'd add up the days. Hey, I worked 16 days. That's 16,000. I produced 20. So there's 4,000 that they would be bonus for, right? At 150 per thousand, that'd be $600. Now that's a real easy way where you're not going to get a lot of fight from your hygienist to kind of go on commission. The thing you're going to have probably struggle with is getting them to push, and really care. Because, Greg used to say, it's like the bad part about having kids work for you is entitlement, and so they don't work as hard, well, hygienists kind of have an entitlement issue right now. I don't know if anybody's had dealt with that lately, but it's a problem. And so, haven't really been pushing commission until kind of now, because we were just lucky to have them, a year ago, 2 years ago. It's been a real struggle, but we're getting to this point where, yeah, you can find them now, in a lot of areas, not every area, but you can find them. So, you should try to find out kind of what the market is like for hygienists in your area. So if you haven't ran an ad lately, talk to some doctors in your area and see if they've run an ad and how difficult it's been. Kind of get a feel for what the marketplace is like there for hygienists, because we're going to have to start holding them to a higher standard. So all the stuff that Dr. Sayer talked about, them, I forget what you called that. What was that called? That sheet that you make them fill out?
The prospectus.
The prospectus, demanding these things out of them. We're getting to the point where we can start saying, hey, you got to do this stuff. A lot of you, if I would have done this in your practices, most of them would have just quit and went to another practice that would have just been happy to have them. So, and I've seen that. So, when we start asking them to do a little pre-assessing, I've had people just go, you know what? I'm going to go somewhere else. So, you kind of got to know your marketplace, where you're at, to know, is it time for you to kind of ratchet up the expectations out of hygiene? Okay. Because like Dr. Chris Martin said, hygiene is so valuable. And Dr. Sayer said it's a lost leader. Don't think of it as some kind of big revenue generator. It's just literally a bucket to hold your patients in. And so that you instead of going fishing, you can just go to the bucket and draw fish out. Okay. So if you need a hygienist, you got to pay whatever you got to pay to have them. This is why Dr. Sayer and Dr. Martin, they're paying $75 an hour, because they know the value of having a hygienist, and not having one is suicide. You're literally losing your practice.
And can I just say, for anybody out there can you guys hear me? anybody that's looking to sell their practice or transition, the DSOs love recurrent revenue streams. I mean, they don't, if you are only counting on new patients and you don't have recurrent revenue, that's robust, they will downgrade the value of your practice. Now, we're not looking to sell. I don't want to sell. I want to ride it into the ground like Greg always taught us. But maybe one day you always want to keep that option open. But if you want to have the highest valuation for your practice, the DSOs they want big hygiene. They love big hygiene.
Yeah, because it's hard to get it's hard for them to recruit doctors to replace an owner doctor.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's probably not going to happen. So they want robust hygiene, so that the practice is not dependent on some mojo in doctor.
Of the key man. They call it key man risk.
Yeah, right.
Key man
So,
risk is when you have one man or woman that's like the magic that makes all the magic happen. It's riskier if you've got those type things versus big hygiene.
right. So that's why they love hygiene. So, and we love it too. So you guys know every column of hygiene is worth how much in restorative for a month? Does anybody remember? We talked about this months ago. Not everybody was here. So it's worth between $40,000 and $50,000 of restorative dentistry, one column of hygiene. Two columns is 80, right? To 100. And every new patient is worth what? Now this is general dentistry. So obviously it's sedation offices. If you're doing something big implant stuff, it changes the numbers a little bit. But every new patient, month one in the practice, is worth roughly $1,000 to $1,200. So you can just kind of do the math in your own practice. We're seeing 30 new patients a month. Okay, that's 30,000. And I've got two columns of hygiene. That's between 80, let's say 80 and 100,000. So that's 110, let's say, of dentistry. Then we've got the two columns of hygiene themselves, and they're worth about 12 to 15 each. That practice should be doing 130 to 140,000 a month. Okay, it's important that you guys know these numbers and these metrics because it tells you what's wrong with your practice. If you don't know this, you're going to be fighting a battle that's pointless. Okay, so you've either got a demand problem or a delivery problem. In other words, you are not getting good case acceptance, or you need more people to tell your story to. It's one or the other. And so you gotta kind of figure out what your problem or your practice is. And that'll tell you, is it time to double down in marketing? Okay. Again, those are rules of thumb on general dentistry. You do sedation, you do implants. If you do supported implant stuff, it changes the numbers a little bit, obviously. So you would want to factor that part of the practice out of the number.
I can tell you that when you guys went over this with us, and then we looked at what we're doing for the last many years, 50% of our income comes from new patients, and 50% is from hygiene, which is different than the straight general practice that's not doing sedation and looking at those things in the surgery and all that from new patients. So I think that you guys say 70% of your production comes from hygiene and
Right.
30% from new patients. And you know,
You're not that, I mean, even you're a huge sedation office, and you still, half of your practice is still coming out of hygiene.
Yep.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep, I'm sure Chris would agree with that too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So it's all about hygiene. And so if it's $75 an hour, you got to pay it. If it's 85, if you've got the demand, you've got to pay it. You got to pay the money. And I saw too many doctors not being willing to pay it during COVID, and they just lost part of their practice, like literally. And it doesn't come back. So you cut a day of hygiene, or you cut a hygienist out of your practice, and you let that happen for more than 6 months to a year, you're not getting these people back. We've tried calling these people. They don't come back. So don't, if you've got hygienists, if you lose one, you've got to do whatever it takes to fill that spot. Okay. All right. Any parting words?
Well, the other thing is, all the doctors, we have to understand that things increase in price and cost, and these patients are not going to lose, or not, they're not going to leave you. They'll leave because you don't have any openings.
Yeah.
Okay. But they're not going to leave you because you raised your hygiene fees by $10.
No,
And that's
No.
about the amount that over the last 4 years you need to do to just cover this. So don't be afraid of, everybody out there is raising fees, and it's just something that we have to do. And if you don't raise the fee, the insurance, I don't use that word, the dental benefit companies won't raise their allotment for you. So we all need to get in the same boat. And I would say the first thing you do, even before instituting all this, we've raised our fees several times now since COVID. Go back, just raise your fees, just get it done. Cover the fact that your hygienist needs $75 an hour. Stop worrying about the patients that aren't going to come because of fees. No, they're not going to come because your hygienist left.
So practices, where we look at the scenario and it's costly for hygienists, and they're in all these various networks, and their hygiene's booked out 6 months. And we go, well, let's just start cutting the networks that don't pay well.
There you go.
So you should be looking. So if you're booked out real far, you should be looking at potentially getting rid of some of these networks that don't really pay well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Agreed.
So, and that sometimes deciding, can be a tough decision. Certainly I'd help you with that. Just give me a call, and tell me your scenario. I'll tell you, what you've got to do, because there's certain mistakes you don't want to make, where you want to have hygiene booked out a good solid 3 months, and then you've got to look at the network and see how many patients are in it. So let's say there's 300 patients in it. You've got to know that you're potentially could lose half of them in time. And so you got to look at, okay, do we have enough demand to backfill that? And if we don't, then we got to raise our marketing budget up. These are all things to consider, but it's worth it. It's just worth it. The net is drastically different as you get out of network. So, and you kind of take it in stages as you get out of network. Meaning you start with one plan, you see the loss rate with that plan, then you take the next plan and look at the loss rate, meaning how many patients came back, and you kind of move through it. It take, depending on how many plans you're in, it can take a year and a half to do it smart. But it's something I wouldn't do unless I was talking to me. So I wouldn't go do it without at least talking to me for 30 minutes about your scenario. Because one of the biggest mistakes we've seen in Whitehall is somebody getting out of network and seeing their practice drop in half. Because they don't know what they don't know. I think that's what Dr. Sayer said. They don't know what they don't know. And they send a letter out saying, hey, we're not in network now, but we still take you. And the patient only reads that first sentence. We're not in network now. So you got to be careful what you say and how you say it. So getting out of network's a whole different strategy. We can talk about that another time, but yeah. Okay. Anything else? Any other parting words?
Yeah, I got one.
Okay.
All right. So it's a quiz. Wes, I think you and I have talked about it. What's the most expensive thing at a restaurant?
I do know.
An empty table. So the key is, opportunity cost is the biggest cost in any business. And if you've got empty seats in the chair, if you're supplanting, people with PPOs that could be higher fee for service patients. I mean, those are just opportunity costs. And, first thing we got to always look at is just fill it up, make the most of the time that we've been given. And, I think that's where a lot of people miss the boat, is just filling up the chairs, fill the tables to start, right?
Mm-hmm. The most expensive thing, as you like to say, is an empty chair.
An empty chair, yeah.
That empty chair in dentistry is the most expensive thing.
Yep.
The old clock at an office is staggering, depending on your overhead. Having an empty chair is costly. Go ahead.
Yep.
And it's the most scary thing for most dentists. Wes and Chris, I think we should do a whole session on capacity blockage.
Yeah.
Because if you have excess patients and you don't have the extra chair, or you have an extra chair and you don't have the assistant,
Staff,
or you've
right?
got 2 phone lines and you really need 4, you are a business that's never going to grow.
Never gonna grow. And you
Yep.
won't even know why sometimes. You
Yeah.
just
Totally.
like
We as dentists don't even,
up and down.
half the people that are listening don't even understand the term unless you've told them before. What is capacity blockage and how prevalent is it? It's phones, it's assistants, it's doctors, it's
Chairs.
chairs, it's
Getting
hygienists.
hygienists. Yeah, right.
All
So I'll even see offices that have undiagnosed capacity blockages for new patients. Meaning you think you can get them in because you've got openings tomorrow and next week. And so you go, I've got openings for new patients. But that doesn't mean that their schedule, the patient's schedule, lines up with your schedule. And so you can have capacity blockages where you can't get new patients in for 3 or 4 weeks, and that's deadly. It's deadly. You got to get new patients in 3 days or less. A week, 5 days is like borderline. You ought to be nervous. So you can have capacity blockages for new patients. There's one easy way to tell. At the start of every month, you should get a report of how many new patients are on the book. Already on the book. So March 1st, how many new patients were already booked into March? It should be about 25% of what you anticipate is normal for the practice. You get 100 new patients, you should have 25, maybe 30 already on the book. But if it's 50%, 60, 70%, it means you got a massive capacity blockage for new patients. I have people, I had in an office this last week, asked them how many new patients they saw 25 last month. March started off, how many new patients are on the book? 25. They're already pre-booked. The month's already done. They can't get one more new patient in.
Yeah, they're just throwing money away.
Like a capacity blockage. There's ways to deal with it, but that's a massive one, new patients. And as hygiene books up, so if you've got problem 2, like I talked about, where hygiene is full, even though it falls apart, or problem 2, it's full, but it falls apart day of, you probably have a problem with getting new patients through the door, be my guess. You'd want to address that. So, okay. All right, you guys, thank you.
Thanks, Wes.
Thanks for joining me.
Wes,
Thanks, Dr. Dave.
thank
Okay.
you, Chris. Appreciate it, everybody.
All right.